looks like we still have a few people funneling in, but I believe it's a pretty full room, so I think we might keep it on lock from here on out, for the most part. Okay. A couple announcements. Number one, there's a sign-up sheet going around, so if you could just tell us that you're here, give us your name and whatever other information you'd like, that would be great. Also, at 6:30 tonight, there will be a reception on the 4th floor, that library room on the 4th floor. There's a patio outside. People have probably already heard about this because we were told to tell everyone every time, so you may be heard, right? Nods if you have. Sorry? Are there drinks? So, did you hear any rumors about that? I'm starting. You're starting? Okay, so I don't want to, really bum everybody out here, but apparently the school does not have a liquor license, and so legally we're not allowed to provide any type of alcohol. But I hope that doesn't diminish your attendance. I'll let you know that Subhash, right, the guy who there will be non-alcoholic drinks, absolutely, and some food, I believe. Just so everyone knows, Subhash was the most bummed of anybody. He really was. He's like, how can we have a party without any drinks? So, okay, so that reception's gonna be fun, the sign-up sheet, and then now it's time for the main attraction. Today we have Ravi Iyer. He is the chief data scientist at Ranker, and I think we're all really excited to see him talk, so.
All right, well, thanks you all for being here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the marketing we do and some of the business problems we solve at Ranker. And my PhD is in psychology, so I will bring you sort of a psychological perspective to this data. So what is Ranker? So some of you might know what Ranker is, some may not. Ranker is a popular publisher. We have lists like you see on many sites on the internet, like BuzzFeed. Here are some of our lists. We're staying on first dates, really simple pleasures. The difference between our list and other lists you might see on other sites is that our lists are crowdsourced. So the same way that there are lists of restaurants, but Yelp's is the product of thousands of people's opinions. Our lists are not an editor's opinion, but there are thousands of people's opinions, hundreds of people's opinions. And I'll go into why that's interesting later. But as a publisher, we have some of the same problems that many people at NBC or Warner Brothers have, or any company that's looking to market has. And we try to solve these same problems. So I often work on things like how to predict whether a person will click on my Facebook post. So Facebook is a large driver of our traffic. It's a large driver of traffic in probably a lot of companies here. And so I'm trying to figure out who should I target on Facebook, who should I not target. Will this person buy this product? So we have a lot of product lists, the best bicycle brands, the best snacks, and I want to know, can I get this person to buy that? Actually click through to Amazon and look under commission. Will this person watch this movie? You're also earning some affiliate revenue from the Amazon videos of the world, the Netflix of the world, and so we were trying to figure out, can we put the right content for the right person and get them to watch a movie? Or we have a lot of related content, so so we have you're reading a list and we recommend other lists you might be interested in. So will this person want to read a related article? So we're trying to predict all these things, and you could probably sum all of this up under trying to predict users' behavior on our site. Coming from psychology, this is sort of an old model of prediction in psychology, which is kind of very trivial in some ways, right? Like it says, behavior is a function of people's personality and the situation. So, and so some interaction between the person and the situation leads to behavior. It's not rocket science, not particularly controversial. But I think it's interesting when you think of the ways that we use data to make predictions in data science typically, and thinking of how much of behavior and personality, or how much of personality and situation are we actually using in our models. So, we've all gone to Amazon and looked up a pair of shoes or a book, and then we go to other sites on the internet and you see the same pair of shoes or that same book following us around. Right? And so that's kind of a lot of what data science and the data pipelines we have do are these kind of retargeting, very close fit affinity models, trying to find the right ad. A lot of data scientists work in this ad universe, and we're guilty of this too. If you say that you like Johnny Depp, then we will try and give you content about Johnny Depp. So there's a lot of very narrow, what did I do last week, and then trying to make predictions based on that. In contrast to looking at the whole person. So what does it say about you that not just that you looked at a pair of shoes, but you looked at a high-end pair of shoes, or you looked at a bargain pair of shoes. And then you look at bargain things across situations, across not just your shoes, but also you look for a bargain car, and you look for a bargain, some bargain pair of clothes. And so then, you have the personality trait of a bargain hunter. And so that's something broader that I can use, after you've already bought your pair of shoes to make predictions. Something broader about your personality, and I'm going to show and argue that that would lead to better prediction. These days, the amount of predictive power that we have on clicking on a Facebook post or clicking on a display ad is actually pretty low. Right? It's a very tiny percentage of people who click on those because they're so uninteresting to most people. So to get at that question, how can I go from these narrow behaviors and predict and using those, serving people something exactly related to whatever it is they did in the past week or the past day, to something a little bit broader about their personality, let me tell you a little bit about what we do at Ranker and how we crowdsource the answers to some of our questions. Again, we have lists about everything, praise, guilty pleasures. BuzzFeed has a similar list. Again, our list is crowdsourced. And so we answer a lot of subjective questions, like who's the best NBA player of all time? So there's not, a very, if you ask 100 people, you might get 10 answers. And it's not, 100% certain what the answer is. It's not necessarily the person who scored the most points. It's not necessarily the person who got the most rebounds. It's not necessarily the person who got the most championships. They're all different ways to answer this question. If you ask a younger person these days, they might answer Stephen Curry, right? Because he's a player, or LeBron James, someone who's in the NBA right now. And there's some amount of error in that measurement. You might ask, and that's probably due to the fact that they're younger. They have no idea who Bill Russell was. They don't remember Michael Jordan from when I was growing up. Similarly, if you ask an older person, they might say Bill Russell. You ask someone in Chicago, they're more likely to say Michael Jordan. You ask someone in LA, they might say Kobe Bryant. All these measurements have a certain amount of error, right? But if you ask a diverse group of people, the error can cancel out, and so on our list, Michael Jordan ends up being, the broadest sample of people sort of agree that Michael Jordan is the best NBA player of all time. So this is sort of basic research on, this comes out of basic research on the wisdom of crowds. You can read the book, The Wisdom of Crowds, Nate Silver's more recent book. Nate Silver, a lot of what he does is really effectively crowdsourcing too. Instead of asking people, he's asking polls. But he's trying to get diverse sets of polls that each have separate sources of error and aggregate across them to find some answer to who's going to win the election. And the interesting thing about crowdsourcing is that it's not about the number of judgments that you have. It's not just raw numbers. What you really are looking for are people who have some expertise. So you couldn't crowdsource how to perform a root canal, right? Because most people don't know how to perform a root canal, so we get kind of a nonsense here. So you need people who have some understanding of some signal that you can extract from their answers. And then the important thing is you need some independence of judgment. So what if I ask only people who like spicy food, what's the best restaurant in LA? I get kind of a biased judgment. I could ask 1 million people, 10 million people, what the best restaurant in LA is. If they all like spicy food, I'm going to get a biased answer, right? It's a lot of the research you see, analysis you see on Twitter data, right? There's a little bit of a sampling problem there, right? It's just people who are on Twitter, which is not representative of the whole population. So what you're trying to get, it's really hard to get truly representative samples, but what you can do is get diverse samples. So if I go and I ask people, what's the best mechanic in town? But I only ask family members of a particular mechanic, well, they're all going to say that mechanic, right? But if I ask, people who drive Priuses and people who drive trucks and people who drive, all sorts of different cars, or people who are older, people who are younger, they all say the same thing, well, then I have a pretty good answer. I can be pretty confident that maybe that's the best mechanic in town. You're looking for diversity of judgment. Intuitively, we kind of understand that in everyday life, right? When we're asking for people's opinions, we try and get a diverse set of opinions. And so this is what lets us answer questions. We have lots of crowdsourced content about things that are somewhat psychological. The most inspiring song, the most admired artist, the most energetic song. And what we're looking for, again, is not the most number of people possible, but we're looking to aggregate across diverse sources of people, across people who come to us from search, from social, across people who are younger, people who are older, across men, across women, and looking for that agreement, that uncorrelated error that we can aggregate across. So how does this relate to measuring personality? So this is kind of how psychologists measure personality. So, say I'm trying to measure something like how much I value experiences. How much does a person value experiences? you might observe that they go to concerts a lot. And there are a lot of reasons why they may go to concerts a lot, one of them being that they value experiences. And it could also just be that they're a big music fan, right? It could also be that their father works for Ticketmaster and they get lots of free tickets, right? So there's many reasons, but one of them could be that they value experiences. All those other reasons are what we call error in the measurement, again. And so I might want to ask other questions, right? So I might want to also see that a person travels a lot and they also eat at a lot of diverse restaurants. And you notice that these are sort of somewhat uncorrelated behaviors, right? So if I go to concerts a lot and I also buy lots of CDs and I also listen to the radio a lot, then that would be indicative of being a music fan. But these are all things that sort of are independent behaviors that all sort of are indicative of valuing experiences and have sort of uncorrelated error that you can aggregate across, and you can be more confident when you aggregate across diverse measurements that you can get to something like someone values experiences. So how does that relate to the original premise that I started with? We want to go from measuring narrow behaviors that are useful for retargeting people, but maybe they're only a part of a person's personality, not a broad part of them. Something broad you can say about a person's behavior. So on our site, we do a lot of, we have lists about everything, right? We have lists about films, about people, about TV, best TV shows to binge watch, for example, best films of all time, best sodas. And so people will vote across lists, and then we can cross-correlate their behavior. Right? So it's a simple 2x2, it's not rocket science, it's just sort of, simple logistic regressions. And so, people who vote on the TV show Sherlock are more likely to vote for Doctor Who, to vote for the actor Benedict Cumberbatch, to vote for Star Trek, vote for the Dove Bar. And so we have all these relationships across all the lists on our site. And so one thing we do in our marketing is we just, if we're marketing something about Sherlock, or a piece of content about Sherlock, maybe we'll try and target some of these other things, right? So that's just sort of what we do and what a lot of people do, that sort of affinity marketing. What we find is that it's actually sometimes useful not just to use the simple affinities, but to sort of factor analyze all those affinities into something that's more indicative of a personality trait, right? So this is a bunch of relationships with a politician, and it might be a little bit small for you guys, so I'll read some of them. So people who like this politician also like Chuck Norris, they like Carrie Underwood, they like Eric Clapton, they like Kenny Rogers, they like the movie Gladiator, and they like the movie 300. So which politician do you think is best? So this is a Donald Trump. And if I just said that, you're a fan of Carrie Underwood, and I named a bunch of other country stars, well, that could just be a country music fan, right? If I just said that they're a fan of Chuck Norris and a bunch of other martial artists, well, that could just be someone who likes martial arts, right? But it's looking at these diverse behaviors and what's the commonality between them that can give you something that's a little bit broader about the person. So this is Donald Trump again. You're right. And then we've been started not just taking the simple affinities, but sort of factor analyzing affinities into these audiences that we market to now. So Donald Trump is liked not just by Carrie Underwood fans, but by fans, people, conservatives, obviously, and traditionalists, history buffs. But it's a little bit more that goes into the model. Looking not just at one behavior, but people who voted on multiple things, and trying to come up with some sort of broader idea of who that person is. Okay, so here is, the next two are going to be of either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, right? So this is, to show that, you can even do this with people who are, very similar in terms of their political profile, right? So here we have, Michelle Obama, Elizabeth Warren, Robbie Williams, Bob Dylan, and then the TV shows Louie and Mad Men. And then for the other person, we have, so Elizabeth Warren and Michelle Obama are still there, but they're kind of flipped. This person, this one has a little bit more affinity for Elizabeth Warren. Jon Stewart, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, again, they're also there, but you also see some other characters like other musicians like Lady Gaga and Mos Def. You didn't see people like that in the other one. And then the TV shows are Modern Family and Parks and Recreation. So here's my question. Can anyone guess which one is Clinton and which one?
This one's Clinton.
Okay, so we have, how many people think that this is Sanders? Again, how many people think this is Clinton? Okay, so more people think this is Sanders than Clinton. And how many people think, oh, so well that's, I guess the other is let's just assume. So you guys are right, actually. This is Sanders, and this is Clinton. And so,
Elizabeth Warren and Lady Gaga.
yeah, I mean, honestly, both things will relate to, a lot of things will overlap. But when you look at the data sort of at a broader perspective, look at the magnitudes, you can sort of start to even parse, people with very similar profiles. So yeah, here's Hillary Clinton sort of like when we look at like the broader psychographic, people who love salad, vegetarians, people who like 90s nostalgia, marijuana fans. And then, Bernie Sanders supporters seems to be kind of unhealthy. They seem to like fast food snacks. It could just be, some of this is an artifact. There is correlated error here. Like some of this is an artifact that needs to be younger people. Sorry, what?
Millennials have
A lot of millennials, yeah. So, a lot of millennials who get to graduate to salad. So how do we use this in some of the social media campaigns? So here's a campaign we ran. We run a lot of music campaigns. We do it on our own behalf. So first of all, we use this, whenever we have a piece of content about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, which we often do, we will target the appropriate group. This is something we ran on behalf of a client. We sometimes do this on behalf of our advertisers. They wanted to market a variety of musicians, including Stevie Wonder. And one thing that's interesting is, if you do the simple thing where you target Stevie Wonder fans, you do okay in terms of getting them to read your list of the best albums of all time, right? But it's actually better to target fans of people like Al Green and Earth, Wind and Fire. Because, in some ways, if I were to ask, how many people in this room like Stevie Wonder? So, I mean, a lot of people like Stevie Wonder, right? It's hard not to like, this is not a very diagnostic thing, right? But like in Earth, Wind and Fire, you went out of your way to like the Earth, Wind and Fire page, or to like the Al Green page. You're a little bit more of a music fan, you're a little bit more likely to be someone who actually wants to read about albums, right? So, a lot of times these correlated behaviors are actually more indicative of the psychographic that you're looking for versus the direct sort of retargeted behavior that we often use. So this is a little bit about, how we can go a little bit behind. And I think it's also true about situations, not just looking at, one piece of the situation, but looking at the broader situation. If I knew that you had already bought the pair of shoes that you bought, then I would know that you didn't have a need. But we don't seem to tie data together in that way, right? And the data markets are getting better, where you can tie pieces of data together. And some of us find that scary, some find that to be opportunity. But for better or worse, it's getting easier to tie these data points together. And for those of us who are trying to make predictions, who are working on data science problems, it really is an opportunity to tie behavior from diverse sources. And again, it's really that diversity that counts, right? If you want to do a personality trait or a broader view, it's not just taking one data set. It's really, it's not just, if only I had Netflix's data, right? That'll give you a piece of it. But, as much data as they have, you also want, ABC's data, and you want their Apple's data. And when you can tie all that together, that's when you get to the level of prediction that we as human beings, sort of have naturally, right? We see people's broader behaviors. Computers often are only acting on these sort of narrow bands of behavior. And that's one reason why they don't do an amazing job these days of predicting what it is we're actually interested in. And I'll argue that this is especially important these days as sort of our needs, the kinds of problems we try to solve in business are higher on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like once upon a time, a lot of what we were trying to solve in business were these things lower on the hierarchy. And so this is sort of psychology 101, like the things we have to satisfy first are these things like food and water and safety, and then later we move on to things like relationships. And once you've satisfied that, then maybe I can move to self-actualization, right? I'd argue for at least a lot of first world consumers, our problem is not how can I get enough calories in my day? It's how can I align my eating with my values, right? How can I eat organic food or eat better or eat locally sourced food or feel better about whatever it is I'm buying or eating. We have enough stuff. We just need, now a lot of what we're trying to solve is really in the realm of the psychological. And so, given that, we kind of have to move what we measure or, I'm not necessarily measuring things, but also what we put as variables and features into our models from the simple to the psychological, right? So instead of looking at clicks, shares, likes, and comments, we might look at, how inspiring is something, how passionate is something, how much does it evoke emotion, how much connection do I have to something. And for these kinds of variables, you need this kind of way of looking at it, because there's a lot of error in this measurement, right? You're not going to be able to ask people this directly. But if I want to find out, how inspired is a person by music, by looking at their behavior across a lot of different situations, you can get a lot closer than by looking at just, what do they like, individual things that they like out of music. So that is my talk, and that's my contact info. And does anybody have any questions?
Yes. So in your last slide, from what we want to how to measure what people want, that's a very subjective area we're getting into. Can you go back to your last
This slide?
Yes, this one,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So how can you actually measure inspiration, passion, emotion, all those great factors, but
Yeah.
so much subjectivity to that?
Yes, and I don't think it's a dimensional or a categorical question. It's not like it's not the thing that you can either measure it 0 or 100, right? It's just moving more towards something that's more. So you might measure it imperfectly at first, right? So if I'm trying to measure, is a person inspired by Lady Gaga, right? A lot of people might just put a variable like, do they like them on Facebook? Do they like her on Facebook? But you can look at other behaviors. Do they buy the book? Do they how much they listen to her music? Are they into certain causes that she's into? And you look at behavior across a lot of situations, and you can get something that's a little bit more indicative of a deeper connection.
Yeah, it's hard to measure that.
It is hard. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm not saying we don't do a perfect job either. But it's something that we're moving towards, and we find sort of low-hanging fruit, like the Stevie Wonder example, and some of the ways that we're trying to scale our highest performing campaigns towards a broader psychographic. And you start there. I mean, a lot of political campaigns are doing crazy things. A lot of times this is useful when you've exhausted, like you have a lot of campaigns where you've exhausted an audience. You can only hit those same people so much, and you need a broader audience, and that's what we often find useful.
So I know Facebook is moving towards that.
Yeah.
The new, what they have, which other?
I think if you were to look on the blue sky markets, or any of the taxonomies of data providers, you will find a lot more things like this than there used to be.
Correlated?
More sort of psychological groups, right? Like aspirers, or
Right.
things like that.
No, I get that. I don't deny that. It's a great way to go. It's just harder selling that when you are trying to,
Absolutely.
as a marketing person, you have to have an ROI.
Yeah.
How do you prove ROI on those?
Well, it's A/B testing, and again, it'll work for some campaigns. It won't work for others. So,
Yeah, earlier you talked about having diverse data versus representative data.
Yeah.
What kind of measure do you use so that you feel comfortable enough, such that your data is diverse enough to?
It's somewhat a function of the problem you have. So, if I were to ask, a lot of the things that we ask at Ranker have a real age issue. Like when I'm asking the best TV show, and you ask older people and younger people, you get very different answers. And so we make sure, so it's really about finding uncorrelated error. So there's some things where there isn't a lot of uncorrelated error in the world. And so therefore, it doesn't really matter there's not a lot of diversity, right? If I were to ask, what color is this wall, right? You guys would all say white, right? There's not a lot of, and maybe someone would say like, beige or something. You might get a little bit of diversity. You're not getting a lot of diversity, and it probably won't vary that much based on groups, right? Like men and the women will probably have the same kinds of issues, and the younger people, the older people. Whereas if I asked, is Donald Trump a reasonable candidate for president? Depending on who I ask, I'm going to get extremely big different answers, right? So if I want to ask that question and get a good answer, I might need to make sure that I have politically diverse groups, right? And if I were to ask something like, if something has a big gender bias, then I would probably have to ask something. I don't want to ask people who, both genders. Or if I ask something about the best restaurant, I need to ask people who have diverse tastes in restaurants. So it's it's trying to look at where is the error in your measurement and measuring across the diversity in those groups.
Can you share some details about the platform which you have?
Ranker, you go to ranker.com, it's somewhat self-explanatory. We're a website, consumer website, people come to it. A lot of people come from search because we have a lot of, we think authoritative answers to questions. So if you type best movies, for example, you'll end up on Ranker. You can type, or longer tail searches like best songs about Tuesday, or best songs about fire, or best rainy day movies. So people come to our site, they consume our lists, just like they do lists on anywhere. Hopefully they like the fact that they're a crowdsourced. I think people sort of get that a crowdsourced answer is better than an editorial answer. The reason people go to Yelp versus food bloggers. And then they vote on things. So like, 5 to 10% of people will actually give us information, just like, some number of people go onto Yelp and actually provide info about that. And then that makes the content even better. The more people who vote on it, the better content it is. Hopefully more people come.
What sort of technology do you use for that?
We use Java, the site's written in Java, from our data stack. So, and one thing so I'm more of a data scientist than a data engineer. I mean, I can program, but I don't. I have people who help me with that. So we do a lot of. I think we use Hive and to run all our correlations for him because it's gotten too big for us to run, without some of those big data technologies. But that's about as well as I can do.
Quick question. Do you guys do any sort of backcasting on polls that you've done in the past? So for instance, like Brexit, right?
Yeah.
Lots of surprises with the result of that vote. Do you go back and analyze the data to see what maybe the traditional political polling companies missed?
Yeah, I mean, political polling companies are very good at what they do, and I don't know if we would beat them on a thing that they really try to poll. Where we beat people is often things that. One thing I thought we did a better job at was like, who should replace Jon Stewart? Actually, there's no ground truth to that, so that's a little hard. But I mean, like, the political polling companies polled everyone, and we polled fans of The Daily Show. And I think, there are some questions where you really need to poll people who have a knowledge of it. We did a better job with one thing. It's also haphazard what we poll and we don't, because it's somewhat driven by user interest. We did a better job than a lot of the pundits on who would win the World Cup. Because I think a lot of our users have like a lot of deeper knowledge, and we're like, versus if you ask your average American, they might say England, I don't know, whatever comes to mind. Right? We have done that. We've also done it like using our most anticipated movies list and predicting box office outcomes, so that's worked out really well for us. Using best TV shows and trying to predict TV ratings. So we have done some of that backcasting, and it's not perfect, and it's. I would say, but we poll we poll hundreds of thousands of questions, and Gallup only can poll a handful. So I think that's in some ways the power of what we can do is the ability to poll these sort of narrow questions that that you just can't. There's not enough. Everyone would be getting phone calls every day from Gallup trying to poll everything. Right? So it's not possible. Sure. Go ahead.
Are there any plans for a spin-off dating website?
A dating website. People, if anyone has, we're always looking for partners, and we have data. We're primarily a publisher, so we use our data for what we need to do, which is marketing. Somebody wants to have some dating. No, there's not. We do not have plans to that. But we talk to people all the time who have interesting ideas for what to do with our data, and we hope to work with them. So,
yeah. And what sort of algorithm do you get using inferring what people want?
I think, a lot of, so my personal opinion, this could be my own bias, is that the algorithm isn't that important. Whatever I used, it would probably come out to the same answer, right? We're just doing we're calculating odds ratios. So, if people are 5 times more likely to vote for, so I compare Chuck Norris fans to people who are not Chuck Norris fans. And if Chuck Norris fans are 5 times more likely to like Donald Trump, then there's a 5 times odd ratio, which would translate, if it were a market research index, would be like an index of 500, or different ways you would express it. You would use it in medical research, 5 times more likely. So, so we're not doing anything fancy. We do it a little bit more at scale, because we have to calculate across, hundreds of thousands of items across, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of lists to calculate all the odds ratios, but it's not a super fancy algorithm. We sometimes try and run fancy algorithms on the resulting data set and make recommendations in different ways. And honestly, I don't find like a lot of value depending on the algorithm. It's really the data we put in and the feature selection, like the designing the variables to put into the algorithm is definitely a lot of things that happen well when we do that well.
With some of your questions, they're very narrow. I wonder what sort of sample sizes do you have, and do you reveal that in the results?
Every list we have has the number of voters at the top. So Yeah, I mean, some of them are very narrow. I mean, I would argue, I mean, that is again, probably maybe my bias, but, you don't need, I think there's a little bit too much of a focus on giant sample sizes. Gallup predicts the presidential election pretty well with 500 to 1,000, to 1,500 people. We find that Gallup level sample size is pretty good for, it's not about, we oftentimes will get tons of people. And when we do that, it's like, the TV show Outlander will say like, oh, we'll go vote for us on our best TV shows of this year, right? And so all their fans come and vote for us. We have tons of data, but it's all really biased, right? What we want is not a lot of people, what we want is a diverse group of people. And so we have to kind of bucket that as like one signal that counts, as just one data point versus all the other people are, sort of in their own data points. So yeah, it's really about diversity and not about sample size.
Well, can you control something like that? If a show sends all their fans to take your poll?
Oh, we don't. I mean, we like that because we want us to be popular, but we can see it too. It's very obvious in the data. Like it's, some part of my job is sort of detecting those anomalies and doing intelligent things when that happens. And so it's not. People aren't that sophisticated. They're not trying to game the system. Even people who try to game the system, there's so much that's easy to measure that it's really hard to, when one item all of a sudden, was getting 100 votes a day and now it gets 20,000. It's not. There's no way to hide that. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys very much for your attention.